Hey, what's up, everybody? Going to do a little bit of a different reaction today, man. This is a reaction to an interview. Instead of a regular music reaction, we're going to do an interview today. And this is an interview by Jimmy Page, and it is his induction into the Academy of Achievement in 2017. And it's an interview that's almost an hour long, man. So Jimmy Page talking for a whole hour. Wow, that is really something. That's an achievement in itself to get that dude to talk at all, much less for an hour. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to this. So before I pop this off, I just want to give a shout out first and a thanks to Susan Palmer, aka SPP. Susan, thank you very much, man. I appreciate this, and definitely looking forward to learning more about the man and how he thinks, how he expresses himself. And this is the note Susan's got for me. She says, "Hi Wayne, hope all is well. Thanks so much for your cutting room floor reaction. So glad you enjoyed it. Since you're branching into interviews, wanted to share this. Jimmy was inducted into the prestigious Academy of Achievement in 2017. There's a webpage dedicated to him as an inductee that includes a fascinating film interview in October of that year. Going through his career, surprisingly some politics with Led Zeppelin. Here's the link of the achievements. He mentioned his first TV appearance at 13 in 57. Don't know if you've seen it, with his skiffle group. It's a hoot. Here's the link for that. Okay, we'll check that out. Jimmy also mentions in the interview that he played harmonica in session work. Unfortunately, not ever in Led Zeppelin. He plays a pretty mean harp. Here's a link to Otis Spann's Stir Me Up from 64 per Rolling Stone magazine. Jimmy on harmonica. Eric Clapton on guitar. Hope you'll check them out." Okay, we will for sure. You know, what we'll do here, Susan, is let's first check out Jimmy's two performances. So one is, I guess it's on TV with his first band when he was a kid. And then we'll check out Stirs Me Up. And then we'll do the interview after that. I don't want to mix things up a little bit because it changes the whole chemistry and the ebb and the flow. And so I really it's the interview that I'm really interested in. But let's check these out first as kind of like a little bit of a warmer. And then we'll go straight into the interview. All right. So, man, first, Jimmy Page, All Your Own TV, April 6, 1957, skiffle band. Let's get it.
Well, now then, people are encouraged, of course, to look at birds as they are to look at all sorts of things. But one
Cheers.
thing that is sometimes not encouraged, according to the
Toaster
words of a
sparkle.
song, is skiffle. And here is a song called Mama, what is it? Mama don't want me to play any skiffle? No.
Anymore.
No more.
Well, Mama don't allow no skiffle down here. Oh, no, she don't. Mama don't allow no skiffle down in here. Well, we don't care what Mama don't allow. Gotta play that skiffle any old how. Mama don't allow no skiffle down in here. Well, Mama don't allow no guitar playing in here. Oh, no, she don't. Mama don't allow no guitar playing in here. Well, we don't care what Mama don't allow. Gotta play that guitar any old how. Mama don't allow no guitar playing in here.
He must have been, what, 12, 13?
Well, Mama don't allow no string bass playing in here. Oh, no, she don't. Mama don't allow no string bass playing in here. Well, we don't care what Mama don't allow. Gonna play that string bass any old how. Mama don't allow no string bass playing in here.
Nice groove.
Now, Mama don't allow no drumming down in here. Oh, no, she don't. Mama don't allow no drumming down in here. Well, we don't care what Mama don't allow. Gonna play that drumming any old how. Mama don't allow no
I wonder if he's still in touch with his bandmates here, if they're still around. Right on.
All drummers have the same look, don't they? They have this kind of preoccupied look. Why?
Well, you have such a lot to do that you haven't got any time to smile.
Now then, you're called what?
JT Skiffle Group.
And you come from?
Epsom.
What are your two names? Yours is?
James Page and...
David Housecall.
Both from Epsom.
Yes.
Where did you learn to play the drums?
My father, he taught me.
Did he?
Yes. And the other guitarist father was in the same band as him.
That's
years
your
ago.
father?
Yes.
These things go by generation. And you're just learning to play the guitar.
Yes,
Can you
teacher.
from a teacher? Do you play anything except skiffle?
Yes, Spanish and dance.
Do you as well? Getting a move on. What are you going to do when you leave school? Take up skiffle?
No, I want to do, biological research.
Do you?
Hmm.
I knew that already. As a matter of fact. What do you mean by biological research?
Well, cancer, if it isn't discovered by then.
You mean be a doctor?
No, I haven't got enough brains for that, I don't think, so...
Not enough brains?
No.
Well, sure you have. Well, all right.
Yes.
Understood, as they say. Not at all. I think you've got quite enough brains to be a doctor. But what you want to do is to research into germs.
Yes.
Do you?
Hmm.
Now then, you want to do biological research as well.
Yes.
But not into germs.
No.
What do you want to do biological
Things a
research?
bit bigger than that. Well, into everything else but germs, near enough.
Oh, why? To do what?
Well, just discover new things.
And to make what?
Well, not to make anything, just to discover things.
Do you?
Yes, and give others information. To make other things.
Oh, very well. All right, now then, from two biologists, both who want to do research, we move over. You don't want to go in for biological research, I know, because you're joining a fleet air arm.
Well, I hope
That's
to,
right?
yes,
You hope
if they let me in.
That's right. Tell me a little more about this skiffle group. It meets how often?
Well, we usually have a rehearsal about once a week.
Mm-hmm. Where?
At Jim Page's house. That's central for all of us, and I suppose his mother has to like skiffle.
That's right, he's a long-suffering woman.
She has
You
to.
made this instrument, I understand, like Anthony. You're a chap who makes his own instruments too.
Yes.
Did it take long to make?
About 5 months on and off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Did it come out all right?
Oh,
See what
yes.
I mean, or did it, when you'd finished making it, did it not play in tune?
Well, no, it came out as I hoped.
It did.
Yes.
Yeah. You going to make another one?
Yes, I hope. Well, I'm going to make a bigger one with a curved front. Bigger, better tone, the lot.
Hmm. You're going to make something as well.
Yes,
so they
I'm-
told me, a balalaika.
Yes, part of the way through building it.
Now then, I also happen to know that you're going to be a research chemist too. Not a research
No,
chemist,
physicist.
a research physicist.
Yes,
Are you?
in electrical research.
What is it about Epsom skifflers that makes them want to be research workers, do you think?
Scientific-minded, that's right.
I expect it is. Yeah, what sort of research do you want to do?
On electrical research.
Why electrical?
Well, electricity, they tell me, is the lifeblood of the country
That's right.
now.
Yes. Well, it's physics anyway, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, now you're going to go into what?
The cotton song.
Cotton song. Cotton away.
When I was a little baby, my mammy used to rock me in them old cotton fields back home. It was down in Louisiana, not a mile from Texarkana, in them old cotton fields back home. Now when them cotton balls get rocky, we don't make very much cotton in them old cotton fields back home, way back home. It was down in Louisiana, not a mile from Texarkana, in them old cotton fields back home. And now when I was just 16, I went on down to New Orleans to them old cotton fields back home, way back home. It was down in Louisiana, not a mile from Texarkana, in them old cotton fields back home. Now when them cotton balls get rocky, we don't make very much cotton in them old cotton fields back home, way back home. It was down in Louisiana, not a mile from Texarkana.
What, 12, 13, he already had that swag. Right on. Oh, there's the crowd. Okay. I was wondering, I didn't hear any applause before. All right, man. I had seen a bit of this before. I'm not sure if it was maybe someone who had sent it to me as a reaction, or if they just said, hey, check this out on your own time, something like that. But I'd seen a little bit of this before. It was more in the capacity of like a minute 20 seconds, something like that. Not in depth like this. I mean, this ran for 6 minutes and 30 seconds. A really good fleshing out there. This guy was asking them some very serious questions at their age, making them express themselves, and they didn't seem to have a fear of the crowd or anything like that. You know, of course they're shy being young, but yeah, these guys were definitely very well versed. And I wonder if Jimmy, let me know, is he still in touch with his, I guess these might be his very first bandmates, if they're still around. If you know that about Page history, let me know. That'd be really interesting. I should look up the history of these guys, check out their names, see what they're up to these days. All right, so let us jump ahead. And this is Otis Spann, Stirs Me Up. Clapton on guitar, Page on harmonica. Let's get it.
Tell me, baby, what's wrong with you? You don't love me, woman like you used to do. No, you stirs me up. Stirs me up, baby. You know you start me up, baby. I just can't get enough of you. You can break my apples up, shake my tree. You know I love you, baby, like you love me, 'cause you stirs me up. Stirs me up, baby. Yeah, you stirs me up, baby. I just can't get enough. Oh, yeah. Tell me, woman, what you gonna do if you don't leave me? You know, I'm gonna leave you 'cause you stirs me up, baby. Yeah, you stirs me up. Well, you know, you stir me up, baby. I just can't get enough of you.
Okay, man. Stirs me up. So this was in 64. It's funny, you know. You look at a young Jimmy Page there, doing the skiffle band thing. So what was he, 12, 13-ish? If so, think of this, man. Just a mere 4 or 5 years after that, he immediately, almost overnight, evolved into this crazy rock and roll guitar playing wizard. You know what I mean? Of course, he had to do his due diligence and all of that sort of thing, but just a short period of time, he was a band leader. He was a session player. He had clout and finesse and all of that. Just watching him, he already had the swag. Now all he needed was the ensemble around him. You know what I mean? I'm looking forward to this shit. Let's hit this up. Academy of Achievement Interview 2017, Jimmy Page. Let's get it. Real Led Zeppelin fans, I toast your sparkle. Jimmy Page started Led Zeppelin. I mean, if you have to break up the
The Yardbirds do their last date. I think it's beginning of July, and during August I've managed to find like the 1st of July or something. During August I've managed to work. I find Robert Plant and I work with Robert Plant. I get into my house and I play him various ideas of things that I want to do on this album, because I had a very clear idea of what would work at that point in time with the FM radio in America, that were just about getting to the point where they were playing whole sides of albums. I realized that if you had an album that had each track almost setting up, as you listen to one track, it would set up the second track, because there would be such a diversity upon the album of different styles and different moods that it would capture people's imagination when they listened to it. And now we had the vehicle with the FM radio to be able to do that. So I had very clear ideas of the material that I wanted to do, and I'd written Communication Breakdown. I had the whole chart really for Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, and so I worked with him. There was just he and I played him some material that I'd done with the Yardbirds, like Dazed and Confused, and he recommended a drummer that was John Bonham, and then I'd seen John Bonham play. I felt him play, actually. It was quite an experience, and he was playing with a musician called Tim Rose, who wrote Morning Dew. I think he might have written Hey Joe as well, that Jimi Hendrix did. So there were now sort of a possible three, and John Paul Jones heard I was getting a band together and called me out and said, I hear you're putting a band together, would you consider me on bass? And I said, okay, marvellous, because I'd played with him in the studios in various sessions. Robert had a short time when he played with John Bonham, but John Bonham was off and playing around and starting to make a name for himself outside of Birmingham. And we had this one rehearsal in a small rehearsal room, not as large as this room even, and we all knew instinctively from that point that we'd never felt anything like that before, because it was four musical equals with this sort of communion, and from that point I got everybody to come to my house and we started rehearsing and recording. And as I say, it's a very fast route, because it's Yardbirds break up in July, August rehearsals. We're actually recording by the end of September, and we've done some dates in Scandinavia, which were a handful of dates, but it was good. I was very keen to be able to play the material live, and we had a set together, of other material as well as our own material, so that we could do that in front of an audience before we went into record, so we could keep the thing really fresh, but any alterations we needed to make, we could do rather than waste lots of time in the studio. And so the first album was done in collectively 30 hours for the time that we went in there and mixed it. So that's pretty extraordinary.
Wow. Yeah.
It was a name that Keith Moon had mentioned some time back, and I asked him, he was talking, about wouldn't it be fun to have a band called Led Zeppelin, and I asked him if we could use a name, because I was going to be in this band of Led Zeppelin with Keith Moon, so was Jeff Beck. So when we were playing in Scandinavia, we were out there as sort of new Yardbirds. It was a cloak of invisibility, really, and even on the first recordings it said Yardbirds on the box, because I didn't want anybody to know what the name of the band was until we really officially unveiled it. And that basically, the album was it. But we came over to the United States in, I think it was right on Christmas in 1968, and then we played some concerts, and then we came to the West Coast and played Los Angeles and the Fillmore. And what happened at the Fillmore was that we had an extra night put in, and we just tore it up there. We tore it up. The bands that were supposed to be playing there didn't come, and they were just sort of jamming. And of course, we had this really hard set, and the whole of the United States got to hear about this group that now had the record out in the early part of January. The record was being played all over the United States, and it was via radio, because of course there wasn't cell phones, there wasn't the internet. It was the word by radio that this band was just incredible. And as we moved across the United States, we by say March, we were on the maybe even before that, February, March, we were on the East Coast and the West Coast, and people were just coming and just coming to see us. It was incredible, because the reception was amazing, and it was incredible. But here comes the interesting thing, was that from that point onwards, we were never able to satisfy the demand of people that came to see us. We were doing multiple shows in cities, and we would still just sell out over all the years that we played. So that's pretty good sort of CV, really. I remember being with the Yardbirds and passing the hotel where Martin Luther King had been, at that time that he'd been assassinated. He'd stayed at the hotel, and the times were so tumultuous, with such an upheaval, and there was so much with the loss of the Kennedys as well, that suddenly it was just becoming a serial nature, and it was just so distressing for the people of the time that had so much hope, and I must say it was there were mixed audiences. I can tell you that much.
Oh, yeah.
That there were mixed audiences, black and white. You'd see the number of black people coming to the concerts. Once Martin Luther King got shot, that changed.
Yeah.
There had been such a positive movement. I know we can all laugh about the Flower Power movement, but there was a peace and love was certainly something that we could all benefit by and live by. That's for sure. And the protests for the Vietnam War were profound. Absolutely. How it would affected the music was as you were a product of the times at that time. Now, as far as the music went at the time, I wanted to make something which was really new, in so much that there would be 4 superstars in the band. That if you listen to the records, you would be able to listen to it and them playing as an ensemble. Or you could listen to it and just listen to what the drummer's doing. Or you could just listen to what the guitarist is doing, or the bass, or the keyboard, or the vocalist. You can just appreciate exactly what that input is.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just one superstar with a collective. This was exactly what I wanted to do. So the music will actually work at counterpoint. So, and that's exactly what it was. So it was something.
Great planning.
Within the music, something really new, something for people to be able to enjoy and connect with, because in those days, that's what people had, was their music. They really, it wasn't like things are today. They didn't have so many things to amuse them, but music was what they really followed, and what they really enjoyed. That was their release. Mm-hmm. And also, if they followed a band, and a band was to fragment, and one member would have a band over here, another over here, then they would follow them, and they would, it was really, and so that was very helpful for me, because with the Yardbirds, I'd built up a cult audience as a guitarist, you see.
Excellent. Great planning.
It was interesting because over here, it was slow, because we spent a lot of time in America, because once that door, just there was a glimmer of light behind that door opening, we sort of pushed it open and went in, and you were allowed to perform and play there and be in America for up 6 months and a year. but not beyond. So as we all know, it's a massive continent, and we spent as much time as we could sort of, trying to play in all manner of states. Certainly within the vehicle of Led Zeppelin, there was so much improvisation that was employed within the framework of a number. And our sets went from, well, in those early days, there were maybe an hour and 20 minutes, to 3 hours, 3.5 hours, because we were jamming and we were making up music there and then on the spot. And because the thing about the band was that you would have to be listening all the time to what everyone else was doing. So if I was to take a different shift, a different route on the guitar, they'd be with you like that. Or if Robert was going to sort of sing, if you were going into a quiet passage and Robert would start singing something, you'd be straight with him on it, with something that was new and new chord structures. And
not everyone
it was
can do that.
a pretty extraordinary thing. So there were frameworks to numbers, but there were whole areas for improvisation. So prior to going on the stage, you'd have to be very focused so that you could really, especially if we were starting with something like Song Remains the Same, which is a pretty testy song. And yeah, you'd need to be very focused to go on and kick off with something like that. But as I may have mentioned before, you wouldn't know what was going to happen within those 3 hours, because so many things would come up, and you wouldn't necessarily remember everything that had gone on either. So it was pretty good that there were so many bootlegs that I managed to listen to with all these different concerts, because some of them really dramatically different from night to night, to hear just exactly how marvelous we were.
Yeah. We're going through that right now, some of these old bootlegs.
The thing about the music was that was it. That was the intoxicant of the whole thing. It was something purely for the fact that if you're playing for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, sometimes 3.5 hours, you'd build up so much adrenaline from that when you come off stage, you couldn't possibly just go home and sort of go to bed. So you would go out and you go to sort of maybe clubs or whatever, just to
wind down,
sort of start stabilizing again. So really the intoxicant was the music. There's no denying that. How do I take care of myself? Well, let's see, I don't drink alcohol. I think that makes quite a difference, because it got to the point where I was in my 50s and I thought I've got a good shot of getting to my 70s here if I wasn't drinking alcohol to any excess, but I thought it was a good idea to stop drinking, and so that's a good number of years ago now. And I used to smoke cigarettes, and I stopped smoking cigarettes, and so that was a bit of a sort of maintenance plan for the future. Yeah. I think what it was is in the early, when you're a teenager, well, actually people drink in a totally different way now. They certainly do over here anyway, unfortunately, to what we used to drink like when we were teenagers and in our 20s. But hangovers were sort of non-existent in your teens because you really didn't drink very much. And then maybe when you were in your 30s, you'd get a hangover which would go into start the following morning. And as the decades go by, you'd be aware that if you'd had a sort of night of drinking, it might even go into a second day. And I thought I didn't enjoy that. I didn't like the idea of either having a drink or having a hangover and effects of it. And I just gave up on that idea. Led Zeppelin didn't play many concerts after 1980. But one of the concerts that we played was actually 10 years ago this December in 2007 at the O2. And that was with the son of John Bonham playing the drums, and John Paul Jones, myself and Robert Plant. and that was an interesting concert because it was we played for about 2 hours and 20 minutes, so it was still in the tradition of long sets, not 3.5 hours, but 2 hours and 20 minutes. And of course you go on and you have to remember everything that you're going to do, and you also need to have those areas where you're going to have free improvisation, because it had to be true to the spirit of what the adventure was about in the first place. But no, I played that totally sober, just as an example.
Kashmir.
Pretty much most of the time, if I wasn't touring with Led Zeppelin, I would be working at home on the guitar, and I'd be working on pieces of music that I would think and direct towards the next album that would be recorded when that time would come. And I had one piece of music that was an absolute epic, and I'd overlaid sort of bass and electric guitars. It was an acoustic guitar piece to start with, and a mellotron, whereby a mellotron would allow you to play in a keyboard way at the time, string sections and brass, etc. And I had this piece, and it was really quite ambitious at the time. And right at the very end of all this guitar noodling, there was this phrase, and it went dan 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 da da dum da da dum da da dum da da dum, and I thought, that's really wonderful. All this other stuff that you get, but that's really interesting. And so I started to play it, and I realised that you could play it in this sort of mantric fashion, and it was almost like a round where it would come round upon itself. And that first phrase, because it's back to front from the way that it is on the record, I thought that if that is played over this sort of mantric riff with this cascading, and I thought at the time brass, it's going to be really interesting, and it's Kashmir, of course. So, yes. and I thought of that. I thought of that in its sort of the density of it, and we'll say the depth of that, because the density comes more into something like when the levee breaks. That's something which is really dense. But I visualised it with orchestra, right? So yeah, I could see it and I could hear it. I think When the Levee Breaks is something which is really, it was groundbreaking at the time. I think the very first album of Led Zeppelin was, it changed everything, really, in the way that people recorded. Right. Then they went into the world of ambient recording, yes. And the first album was full of so many ideas that hadn't been done before. So that has to be said, that's sort of top of the list, really, because without the first album, there wouldn't have been a second album. So.
Is the first album your favorite? Let me know if it is. All of you who favor the first album, let me know.
When I formed Led Zeppelin, I formed it with the idea and the ethos that it was going to change music. That's what I wanted to do, and it clearly did. It clearly did, and it brought to the forefront these master craftsmen that were involved in that band. The interesting part of it all is that here I am, and here I am now as 24 when I formed that band. I'm 73 now, and the lifetime achievement of it is the fact that even from the time that first album came out, even though I'd been a studio musician and played on countless records and albums, the amount of people that I've met throughout my life, since from the age of 24, that said that Led Zeppelin music has meant so much to their lives. And that's a wonderful thing, a remarkable thing, to know that you've made a difference in people's lives. But not only that, in parallel with that, is the young musicians who who have been impressed by the production techniques, by the guitar playing and the various styles of guitar playing, by the songwriting, and they've been inspired to be musicians themselves.
The story behind
and
the music.
that's
just as
a wonderful
interesting.
legacy
Yeah.
to have. To know that you've been able to do something which has made a change, something which was your hobby, something which was your passion, something which you believed in
Follow
all
your
the way
bliss.
through, and you wouldn't deviate from it. But the thing that you believed that you had to do was keep making an improvement on your own personal performance and what you could do, and expanding the whole horizons of everything. And that's very difficult to actually convey it, because I think music is something that you actually experience. You feel it on an emotional level as much as an intellectual level, but in a way it needs to be. It's good to actually hear the music, to be able to give examples. But I know instinctively that the various construction that was used in the music of Led Zeppelin, these sort of like, for example, a song like "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You," "Ramble On," has got like the acoustic guitar, and then it comes into a full ensemble chorus, which people would refer to that as a power chorus. Well, I know all bands in the 1980s were using that technique. I think just the whole approach to it, the whole taste that was employed, I think had a lot of appreciation.
He's talking about that renaissance of creativity.
I learnt from records when I was a teenager, and so I wasn't necessarily copying them, but I was learning almost like an academic. I was learning, and then I was sort of recreating what they did. But then I started to try and do things in the spirit of what that was, or within that Chicago movement of the 50s. That sort of thing, those sort of riffs that they did. It's not necessarily copying, but people can definitely use it. The work that I've done, or the Led Zeppelin work, or any of the work, but it's a textbook, and it's a jolly good textbook at that. So you don't have to play in a day now, book play in a day. You just can source it on the internet. I guess we have to go back to when I was about 12 years old, and my parents had moved house when I was about 8, and there was a guitar that was left behind at the house, and it was a campfire guitar, you know, the sort of cowboy one with this sort of hole, and it couldn't be called a flamenco guitar. It had steel strings on it, which was pretty interesting, because normally if you found one of those guitars around, it might have the nylon strings, but it's just steel strings, and it fortunately didn't get thrown away. So it had been there for quite a while at the house, and during that sort of time in the 50s, there had been the explosion of rock and roll with Elvis Presley, and all this wonderful music that was coming from America, with the rockabilly and the Little Richard sort of music, Jerry Lee Lewis, all this sort of wave of music. But over here in England, there was also something called skiffle, and skiffle was something that you would actually see on the television performed by a man called Lonnie Donegan. And Lonnie Donegan was quite an inspiration. I realise now, looking back, for all guitarists of that point of time, and he would be singing sort of songs, old folk songs by a lot of American music, lead belly songs, and he'd be playing on the acoustic guitar and doing remarkable performances that sort of captured everybody's imagination. So there was all this wonderful music coming from America, but on our television screens there was this man playing an acoustic guitar, like the campfire guitar that had been left behind at my house. And I managed to find somebody at school. There was only one person who played the guitar, and he was actually one day on the school field playing these Lonnie Donegan songs. And I had a chat with him afterwards, and I said, well, I've got one of those at home. And he said, bring it along to school, and I'll tune it up for you and show you a couple of chords. So the playing guitar point came from that sort of, there's the intervention of the guitar, and it's a sort of Excalibur, isn't it? It's just basically, but also the fact that this guy shows me some chords, and I start playing because I don't stop playing from that point.
So he was
Even though I
tough.
can only play one chord and a second chord, I'm just playing all the time until I learn some more chords, and it just sort of keeps going on. It got to the point where I was going to do a trade-up. I needed to get a guitar that was a little more user-friendly, let's put it that way. And my father had said, well, I can see you're coming on well with this. He said, I don't understand it. I don't understand what you're doing, but I'm not going to get in the way of it. And he actually helped me get the first guitar on from the campfire guitar. And
Nice.
he said, providing you keep up with your academic studies, then that's fine.
Way to go, Dad. You're on right.
It was
So
a
he was
program
13.
called All Your Own.
Right.
And there was a name of the band, but I've actually got the script from the TV show, and it has various things that are going to be within the show of All Your Own, and it just said the Skifflers, of which there must have been hundreds of skiffle groups in England at the time, but we were just referred to as the Skifflers. Yeah, I was very, very nervous. Yeah, I can see how nervous
He
I
still
am when I see
managed
that
to
clip.
sing, and he still had some
Because
swag.
it was a big deal, and you're going to be on television, which meant that people at your school friends would say, "Look, that's the boy who's at school. He's always playing the guitar if he can get away with it, in lunch break, etc." I must say that it got to the point where my guitar was actually confiscated because I would take it to play it at
Heard about that.
during recesses and breaks, because I was so connected to the instrument. I was constantly wanting to practice on it and learn more things.
Yeah, you got to have a love affair.
I just had a connection with it. I clearly did, and the fact that I could actually, I could play a chord on it, and you just hear this thing going on, this wonderful resonance, and it's a tactile instrument as well. I've always thought that guitarists, through the years, that guitarists that in any field, well, I don't know about classical so much, but certainly within the electric guitar, we'll say, if you had 4 guitarists that and a guitar and an amplifier there, they would come and play it, and they would sound exactly like they sound because of the tactile aspect of the instrument. It's an incredible phenomenon, but it's absolutely true. And yet, I would play it, and I wouldn't sound like any of them. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing, but it has a lot to do with this tactile instrument. I didn't have lessons.
Everyone has a signature
I learned
sound.
from a book called Play in a Day, and actually, I learnt from Play in a Day, and many years later, I became a studio musician, and the way that the notation was in Play in a Day was exactly the way they wrote out chord charts. So. It was very useful, wasn't it? I completed my studies at school, and I decided to dive right into music. I left school, and I was already playing in a group. I was playing in a group on weekends, and they were a London group, and because I was living at Epsom, which is some distance. It wasn't as though I was living in London, but I was headhunted out of Epsom to join this band, and I was still at school, and I was still doing fast approaching my exams. So after my exams, we were able to do more concerts, and we were touring around, all over England, really. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun until it got to the winter, and our van, well, we had to sort of drive between concerts, and the heater broke in the van. So you'd come out of a very hot dance hall and sort of go into the van, and it was pretty uncomfortable, and I started to get a sequence of fevers, and it was purely because, you know, I wasn't sort of dressing properly coming off the stage, and going through winter nights, and I was getting caught up with sort of fevers, and it was coming in a serial nature. I don't think it was fair on the rest of the band. And one of the things that was quite interesting at that point was that the music that we were playing was in advance of what the popular taste was, and it was to catch up some sort of 18 months, 2 years later, which is quite a long time, really, in the way that music was moving really, really fast, and the way that fashion, musical fashion was changing and being explored and was opening up. We were playing in sort of town halls and dance halls and corn exchanges as well, all manner of venues. And the public that would come along to dance. Some would come to really listen intently to the music, but you were expected to play top 20 hits. I think this reflects in the Beatles' first album, because you can hear that they're doing covers in the first album. That's clearly the sort of things that they were doing in live shows. We were doing the Chess catalogue from Chicago, so we were doing Chuck Berry songs, and it was in advance of the musical taste of what was going on, and so. I began to play harmonica as well as guitar. I was always playing acoustic guitar as well as electric, though. So I became quite a sort of all-round musician. I really paid a lot of attention to the blues. Well, you had to if you're going to play harmonica. I went to art college anyway. I decided to make a hiatus and go to art college. Actually, I wanted to study fine art and the techniques of oil painting. And actually, in a foundation course at that time, it was the acrylic paints, and it wasn't oil paints, and everything was with what was currently, I guess, the fashionable media, as opposed to the oil painting. I was at art college. I didn't stop playing. I didn't stop playing the guitar, electric guitar. And there was a club in London called the Marquee Club. It was a very famous club. It was an R&B club, rhythm and blues. And I used to go along to on a Thursday night, every Thursday night regularly, to see the various artists who were there. And I met somebody who had been in a previous band, and he was a piano player and singer. And he said, we could play the interval band here if you want. And I said, fine. I mean, I'd never met him to this point. And I said, okay, let's do that. So every Thursday night, I was playing in the interval band. And basically what happens at that point is that somebody asked me to play on a record. And I play on this record, and because I had a pretty distinctive guitar style. And you could hear that it was a different guitar player within this recording, and I started to get lots of offers. But I'm still at Arts College, but I'm getting lots of offers, and I'm fulfilling in the evenings doing these sessions and still completing my studies, pretty much like I was a few years earlier, where I was doing my academic subjects. But then we had a recess. I mean, it might have been the sort of Easter break or whatever, and I just had so many sessions coming my way. I was doing sessions in the morning from 10 o'clock to 1, 2 o'clock to 5, and 7 o'clock to 10, in multiple locations in London, like EMI, Decca, Pi, Phillips. And when it was time to go back to art college, I thought, I can't really do this. I'm not being
Can't do
honest. Now,
both.
somebody else could use my place there. And I'm having so much fun doing these recording sessions because they were basically, I was sitting in with groups where they in those days what they would do, they would replace the drummer because the drums would take quite a while to get a balance in a recording studio. So they bring in a session drummer where they knew immediately what his sound was going to be. And I would be augmenting the groups or sometimes replacing the guitarist, and they would just ask me on certain circumstances just to play whatever you want to play. So it was invention and improvisation. So I had a good sort of year of doing that, and then they eventually, from these little chord charts and play in a
That
day,
was the foundation.
then I started to get some music
Building
notation.
blocks.
And basically what it was a hint, you're really in this world, and you're accepted, and we love you here, and the part that you can play, because I could play so many different styles of music, see, and I was also being employed in that way. So folk music and pop music, rock and roll music, blues music. So I would play what was there, or it was pretty obvious what you had to do. But once you had the musical notation, then I had to learn to read music very, very quickly. And curiously enough, I met somebody last night, Dr. Luke, who's a producer, yeah, and he was saying exactly the same thing happened to him, that he was doing sessions and then he had to, but that was in America. But and I would assume that he was more of a specialist player, but I was a complete all-rounder, you see. So then it was really working well. Somebody who I met when I was 12 years old, and I had a homemade bass, and he had a homemade guitar. And he was brought to my house by his sister, who was in art college in Epsom, was Jeff Beck. And I'd known Jeff Beck, and I put Jeff Beck in for the role of the Yardbirds, and we were very, very good friends, and he would come and visit me, and we'd often, while I was in this whole incarnation of being a session musician, and he'd invited me to Yardbird shows, and we'd also discussed the possibility that it would be really fun if we could both play together in the band on lead guitar and have something in the style of the old big bands like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, where you had the brass sections,
Nice.
really, really strong and with vibrant effect. And one night we went to Oxford I think it was the Oxford Union dance, so it was a May ball or something like that. And that night there was a row with the band, and the bass player left the band. And they had to play the Marquee, this Marquee club, and they didn't have anybody, couldn't work out how they were going to get to fill in on bass. So I volunteered to play bass, but so that we could then mutate into this plan of having Jeff and myself on lead guitars, and the rhythm guitarist would take over the bass.
I forgot the bass player's name.
That's what happened. So then the Yardbirds continues on. Jeff leaves the group. I continue as a four-man. I must say that what I need to retrace the footsteps here. During the time that I was a studio musician, it was a remarkable apprenticeship, because the studio discipline, everything is literally within seconds on the clock. If a session was scheduled from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, if the second hand went beyond, then you would be in overtime. And so you had to be absolutely precise, and you had to be able to deliver all the time. If you hadn't, you wouldn't be seen again. There'd be somebody else coming in. But it's a very closed shop, but I was fortunate enough to get in there.
Wow.
When I was a studio musician, I'd done home recordings, and where you overlay one guitar on another, this sort of thing that Les Paul would do, but of course it wasn't anywhere near as sophisticated as Les Paul. But I would hear things on records and sort of think I could work out how they were done, but now I had the opportunity to ask engineers how things were done. I could play records to them and say, how do you arrive at that? How is that effect done? Is that a natural echo chamber, or is it a fabricated spring reverb or whatever? I could ask. I got to learn how to do microphone placing, because there's a whole science to microphone placing, and I was a producer as well. So now I come out of that world. I'm an active musician in the Yardbirds, but having a really good time. I'm starting to really enjoy myself and be able to try some of the more avant-garde ideas with the Yardbirds, even like playing the guitar with a bow, etc. Having been a studio musician, I'd seen drummers really playing their hearts out, and there'd be in this like little booth, which was totally dead, so there was no sound reflective surfaces whatsoever, and it would just sound like they were hitting a suitcase. And you'd see they were quite frustrated when they'd hear the drum sound, even though you weren't party to hearing playbacks. Sometimes when you were a studio musician, actually you didn't know who you were going to play with, because they'd just come walking through the door, you were a hired hand. And so you didn't really have any say in, the drummers wouldn't be able to say, well, wouldn't it be better if? Because that wasn't necessarily your job, unless you were asked to. So what I knew was that I could see what a frustrating role it would be for drummers. And a drum is an acoustic instrument, and it has a tone to it. And I knew that in the recordings that I loved from the past, that there was certainly an ambience that was used to the drums. It wasn't just a close mic and no ambience within a room. So yeah, and certainly with the recording of John Bonham, who was a master craftsman and a genius of drum technique, and his technique of tuning the drums, you could hear them projecting, and it was so important to be able to capture that with overhead mics. You see, it's not necessarily rocket science, but all of the work that I'd done in the studio, and especially the studio discipline, was really came out. So it was an apprenticeship.
Nice. See, that's what I'm talking about, man. The stuff behind the music.
This is an interesting story, because the string sections really didn't like the. I mean, they'd spent years mastering their bowing techniques, and there were these sort of people like drummers and bass players and guitarists. And I think they thought they just made a bit of a noise rather than music as they saw music. And one of the violinists came to me one day, and he said, "Have you ever considered playing?" They just didn't talk to the other. You know, it was a sort of them and us. "Have you ever considered playing the guitar with a bow?" And I said, "Well, I don't think it'll work, will it? Because the strings are uniform, but whereas a violin is arched or a cello is arched." And he said, "Well, here's my bow. Would you like to try?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I tried it, and I could see there was massive potential. And I went, after that, I went and bought my own bow. But this fellow was the father of an actor of David McCallum, Man from U.N.C.L.E. That's it. So he was the father of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. He's a very cool gentleman.
Great association.
It was on top of a bus, a double-decker bus, and it was in Beijing, at the Olympics. And it was the closing ceremony of the Olympics in 2008, and they were passing over the baton, so to speak, to London, and I was there on behalf of London, and there was myself and a wonderful singer called Leona Lewis, and we performed Whole Lot of Love, and a full version of Whole Lot of Love as well. Wow. It was pretty amazing to play in the stadium there, which we know as the Bird's Nest. It was immense. It was a huge stadium, and I know it was being televised all over the world. and I knew there was just one guitarist there, and there was a heavy weight on his shoulders not to mess up, not to mess it up for Leona or anything else, and it was marvellous, absolutely marvellous. And so, you know, as far as doing things in your comfort zone and not in your comfort zone, that was challenging. Oh, and the other thing was that you had to be elevated up into the air, and that was interesting because I had a fear of heights before doing that, but I had to take that on, and had a technique that I was shown
Things you have to do for your craft.
You can conquer that. So I thought that was rather interesting. Somebody took me to the Royal Garden Hotel, and we were standing on the ledge. It was like it was somebody who was a sort of hypnotist who was showing me some techniques, and well, it worked.
I gotta see that performance, man. Send me that if you guys know what it's
As a
talking
studio
about.
musician, I would be brought in to augment a band, and I worked with a producer, an American producer called Shel Talmy, and you didn't know who you'd just be asked to take your guitar and your amplifier to a studio, and then lo and behold, in comes a band called The Who. Now, I'd seen The Who play at the Marquee Club, and I thought, what am I doing here? Pete Townsend's an amazing guitarist. And actually, I'm there on the first record called Can't Explain, playing the riff in the background. You can't hear it, but I was on it, and it wasn't necessary because Pete was flying during his playing on Can't Explain. But it was, you can imagine what the energy was like in that studio when that was being recorded. So that's marvellous to be part of that.
Wow.
I played on some various things with the Rolling Stones in the early days in the 60s, where they were producing other artists, and I was a studio musician, and I played on one of their albums. I played on a track called One Hit to the Body, which was much later. That was in the 80s. Played the lead guitar. I'm very, very grateful. I'm just a very fortunate man to have been blessed with a gift that within the area of performance, with that
Blessed
gift,
with a gift.
has brought so much happiness to people and inspiration to people. So it's good. Now, I'll be passing on the baton now, like the baton was passed on at Beijing. So it'll be like a sort of musical Olympics, won't it? Well, it's young musicians and the way that, the whole generation and the phenomena of musicians or producers who aren't actually musicians, but they can process music and construct music with computers. It's pretty extraordinary and amazing stuff. And it still comes down to the theme of the idea in the first place, and the imagination and imagining this and working towards it and being able to manifest it. As far as the sort of tactile instruments, the acoustic instruments, there'll always be fine musicians. There'll always be new proteges, in the field of obviously classical music, trained music, but also music which is sort of relatively untrained as well, Yes, there will, which is sort of almost like a folk music because it comes from the people. There'll be Led Zeppelin product coming out for sure that people haven't heard, because I'm working on that. And next year will be the 50th year, so there's all manner of surprises coming out.
2018.
And then I hope to be seen to be playing.
From 68
so
to
I better get on with
2018.
it. So it's quite an achievement to have a record released in 1971 and people still refer to the solo and as one of the best solos of all time.
Yeah.
And it gets voted one of the best solos of all time over all the decades.
He's
I mean,
making
that's
that
pretty
thing
extraordinary
speak to you,
stuff.
that's why. It resonates.
I may not be able to top that, you know. I've only got a few years left.
Oh, brother. Since I've Been Loving You. For me, that's the pearl of his guitar solos. Since I've Been Loving You. You talk about making that thing speak. That was great, man. That was excellent. I enjoyed that interview almost as much as I enjoy the music. Getting behind the music and appreciating how the music got to us. That long road traveled to get this great music to us that we hopefully don't ever take for granted, because we see the blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, and all of the passion that went into it in the formative years to come about bringing it to us. I really appreciate getting behind the music. That is the juice of the element of music that I appreciate the most. A lot of people ask me, hey, why do you fashion your reactions like this, where you're doing, the reacting, you're asking a whole bunch of questions of your subscriber base, and then you're doing a lot of reading and research and stuff like that. This is why, because I really dig the story behind the music. And if I can see interviews from every single star out there of classic rock, I would watch them, man, because you're getting the juice of the information. Just the formation of Kashmir, just all of those things. It's really fantastic stuff. And you know what? Let's give a shout out to Jimmy for the fact that not only was he talented, he was speaking about his talents and his God-given talents. Not only was he blessed to come upon, he mentioned 3 other master musicians just like himself, formulating a really incredible signature sound. But I also give credit to him for having an awareness of what was happening around him at the time. Let me explain. Paul McCartney said that at that moment there was a creative bug in the air, a creative germ, if you will. I describe it as that Renaissance, a period of creativity. Jimmy is saying that he was aware of the times he was in. He was aware of what was happening, and he could see the road ahead. He saw the formation of FM radio over here. He saw the foundation of the session music and where it's taken him and what it's evolving into. He's being challenged. There was a fork in the road. Art school, music. And he had to make these choices, had to make this decision, and he had to establish how he was going to proceed. This dude, at the tender age of God knows how old, 20 whatever, he already knew all of this shit going ahead. He wasn't just saying, I'm just gonna just jump in and give it a whirl and see where it goes and how far it takes me. He knew how far it would take him. That's the difference. This guy, I'm telling you. Same thing with Robert Plant. Robert Plant had a big challenge. 10 Years Gone, you listen to that song, he had a choice. At that moment, the love of his life was saying, it's me or your music. Make a choice. You can't have both. He had to go the road less traveled, right? These dudes were brave and bold. And I don't know how much Robert knew where it was going and how far it would take him, but Jimmy knew exactly where he was going with it. It's either he was going to fall flat on his face or he was going to just conquer the world. He knew already. Hats off to him, because he planned this shit well in advance. He's like, okay, setting it up here like this, setting it up here like this. This is the result of where we're going to be in so and so such a period of time. The guy had a great awareness about where they were going to end up. Very, very smart. So he was very, very blessed. God-giving talent, and he was also putting in the work, though, to acquire all of that awareness, to acquire all of that knowledge. It wasn't just a matter of, yes, he's talented, but he's not putting in the work. dude was putting in the work. A horse is led to water. He didn't have to be charmed to take a drink. He swallowed up that entire damn lake. He was running with the shit. So the guy knew exactly where he was going. And then being paired up with 3 other master musicians like himself, creating that signature sound. I'm not getting all spiritual on you, but these are what you call gifts from God. Your God-given ability, your orientation and your awareness, all of the elements coming together to actually open up the frontiers for you. These are gifts, and this is what we as individuals have given to us as our right to own. If you want to achieve something in life, you think about it, you desire it, you ask for it, you create it in your mind, and you take the steps. You might not actually know. It's like driving in the dark. You're going from New York to LA. In the dark, you're driving. You're only following the signs that lead you there. You have the faith that you're going to end up where your destination and your desire is. You don't have to see the entire road ahead. You just know that at the end of that road, that's where you're going to end up. It's faith. So not only did he have an orientation and a blessing, but he had faith in his ability, faith in that he knew where he was going to end up, and faith in everything else around him, creating what evolved into Led Zeppelin. It's a fantastic story. You know, it's one of the most intriguing stories of manifestation in music, coming from that period of that Renaissance period of creativity, and creating Led Zeppelin is a masterful story and a great example of what you can achieve just by creating it in your mind. Another example is, I forgot the name of the coach, but he used to have his track stars sit and visualize the entire event and ran that actual event in their minds first before he put them on the track. And the result is that they achieved their goals more. It was more advanced, it was more enhanced. And he says that this is the power of creative thinking and the power of the energy, the magic elixir that creates all of these things. He was very, very wise for his time. I believe it was the coach that was also the coach for Jesse Owens. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about manifestation. I'm talking about creativity. We all have that ability. Some of us use it more than others. Jimmy Page was using it in spades. Let me tell you, you don't have to be a person of faith. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to believe in anything at all, but you're a human being. You have the ability to think. You have the ability to desire. You have the ability to plan and take action. And through all of that, you know somehow at the end of it all, you're going to get there or you're going to get very, very close. But either way, you are definitely going to make something happen. You're going to stir the well, aren't you? Great story here about the power of manifesting. That's basically the bottom line. That's my message. So, man, Susan, thank you very much for this. You are the shit, man. I appreciate you sending me this. This is great. And yes, I know it's outside the norm of what I do where reactions are concerned. And like I said, this is for the true Led Zeppelin fan, not just the surface level fan that always wants to be entertained. This channel, if you haven't figured it out by now, is more than just that. In fact, it's not that at all. If you're looking to be entertained, there are other options out there, but this is about the appreciation factor, and you don't need to be entertained to appreciate something. You know what I'm saying? That's the way I roll. This is about appreciation. So the real Led Zeppelin fans, if you are still here after all of this time, all going on to 90 minutes, let me know that you're still with me. I'm the real shit. You're the real Led Zeppelin fan. Hashtag I'm the real shit. Let me know that you're still with me. All right? So, yeah, I'm just scrolling down here, checking my notes before I bounce. I got reactions I got to get to. John, Caden, Brian, Finesse. And I think Finesse has some other Led Zeppelin product for me. I can't recall at this point. But yeah, man, I'm going to hit these up very soon. Got a couple of new patrons to take care of as well. Got to hop over to my PayPal account because I got a few people on PayPal that I've got to take care of. And then I got to hop over to YouTube because I've got a couple of subscribers that I want to take care of. And then I've got to go to my private email because I still have some of my old subscribers who still has my private email, and they email me their recommendations that way, right? I had to cut it off from the main body because it was unbelievable, man. When I first started, and once I got into the Led Zeppelin groove, 6 months into my channel, I had to take that personal email away because I would come home, man. At one point in time, on average, I was getting 125 emails a day, a night. And I realized, I looked up, it was 2 a.m. before I was done. So, oh man, I had to, So it's good now, it's balanced. So on average, I get about 50 emails a day now. So that's more manageable, right? But yeah, when I first started and when the Led Zeppelin factor kicked in, it was brutal, man. So, lost a few girlfriends, but that's all good. So, man, that is my reaction to this fantastic interview. Jimmy Page is a class act, and he's a great example of what you can achieve when you have a goal and a vision and a passion for what you want to accomplish, and just the love of your craft. All of those things was in place that created Led Zeppelin, that's for sure. And that's what we are enjoying today. So thank you very much for your sacrifice, Mr. Page. All right, y'all, I'm going to bounce. Have yourselves a good one. Hope you enjoyed this interview. What else was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Led Zeppelin, I finished, like I said to you, I finished the Physical Graffiti album. Went up for a while, and then it got blocked. So I will put it to you guys again. Should I do Coda? That, in my opinion, I'm finished the full album reactions for Led Zeppelin, the studio stuff. But some people are divided where Coda is concerned. Yes, it's a Led Zeppelin album. No, it isn't. So let me know. Should I do a full album reaction to Coda? I'll wait to hear from you. Some have said yes, some have said no. But let me know. And then from there, I will make that decision. I'll wait to hear from you. Okay? That's what I was going to say. All right, y'all. Thanks for joining me. Take care. Have a good one. I'll see you later. Peace.